Hey, good afternoon. This is Wes. I'm here with Jamie Yarbrough. We're here to talk about not to, well, Jamie's here. Jamie is a veteran, and he has personal knowledge of some of the veterans' situations with homelessness and things like that. And anyway, I want to turn this over to him. This is a bit of a continuation of the town hall meeting and the things that were discussed there.
Sure. You might want to mention your proposed guest that. Hello? Can you hear me?
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, he might want to mention the guest that's supposed to be here. And I can't remember his name.
Oh, we're looking for Jerry Johnson. I hope he'll still make it today.
And he's the commander of the.
He's the post commander of Post 1381 here in Crescent City, California.
At the Veterans Memorial Building, the
Yep.
chapter for Veterans Assistance.
Yes.
They used to belong to Chris Thorpe, I believe. He was in that position for a while. He moved on to something else. But we do have a veterans representative in the county to help with veterans issues, support, including helping with the legal problems or getting benefits from the VA. They also used to provide transportation down to the VA clinic in Eureka. Since then, there have been a number of changes in the VA medical program that allow veterans with urgent needs or needs outside of 40 miles to actually go into Sutter Coast and get coverage for a number of different issues instead of having to go all the way to Eureka. As I mentioned, well, a little bit of background about me. I did 4 years active in the Air Force, and then I did right behind that 17 active reserves in the Air Force. So total of 21 total good time years, which gave me full benefits and a pension. Got my medical. Wouldn't trade the experience for all the money in the world. It was great education. I handled it in a good fashion that I stuck with it. I kept my nose clean. I showed up to work on time. I did a good job. I learned what they tried to teach me. A couple of side notes. I went in the Air Force during the Vietnam years from 72 to 76. While Vietnam died when I was in Europe, I didn't see any action. So I didn't understand firsthand what it was like to be on the front lines. But because I was in Europe, there were a number of people who went through Vietnam and didn't want to get out or had time left on their contract, so they were recycled into the theater. And I saw people that came straight out of the jungles, and I saw what it did to people, which brings about one of the more important topics of having gone through any kind of war, whether it's Vietnam, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Afghanistan, you name it, and that's PTSD. PTSD, and of course the Vietnam thing, once it died, first of all, that impacted me directly because my commissioning program lost money and I didn't get to go get my degree and become a pilot like I wanted to. I was very unhappy about that. But because of the way Vietnam ended, it was a bitter pill for a lot of people, where they didn't get the respect because they didn't get a victory. They thought we left Vietnam with our tails between our legs, and it was not really considered a win for the national image, and a lot of veterans got a bad rap for having participated in it. And there's a lot of very unhappy Vietnam vets out there, and I understand it completely. The way we treat our vets overall, from all that are living, have lived, gone through unbelievable experiences compared to regular civilian life, while they do get a very compassionate hand from the government that put them out there for a cause of God and country and democracy and rah-rah, the flag. They don't necessarily get a magic carpet into civilian life after they get out. And after having been utilized, they often feel like let down. When I was in active duty, actually even going through basic training, actually it was tech school after basic training, I learned a little bit more, actually a lot more, about what the life was going to be like once I got in, and recognized there are some people that were in there for 4 years and they left, and there were some people that said, this is my home, because either they didn't have one or they liked the military life, and they became what were called lifers. Lifers would stay in for 20 years and sometimes even longer, and that was their life. They wake up in the morning to the bugle, they put in their 9 to 5, they wear the uniform. It's who they become. And after that's over, just as in civilian employment, a lot of times you identify who you are with what you do, and you become your job. And when your job is over, what happens to you? Well, you sometimes go into depression because I don't have a job, so I'm nobody. You don't get the recognition, the responsibility. There's a vacuum. And when I was going through basic training or going through tech school, and I learned about lifers, I learned that there was a life expectancy after retirement in the military, and it was 18 to 36 months before they either died or committed suicide. And I said, no, that's not going to happen to me. I didn't understand it at the time, but this was a beginning of PTSD. This, like I said, this is Vietnam years. And when people lost the sense of connection with the military, they lost their family, all their friends. It struck a deep chord with a lot of vets. So
and this happens with some law enforcement and things like that as well.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Now, we never heard of PTSD until, I guess, so many recent years.
Desert Storm is pretty much where it started.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, whatever they had come out of World War II, do you think it was viewed differently? Do you think it was quieted? Or do you think that they came out such a big victory that it changed how people felt about it as they went back into civilian life?
Yes, I do. And there's 3-4 different reasons that really stand out. First of all, we came out of World War II victorious. We were celebrated when vets got out of the service. They had confidence that they did what they were supposed to do. That confidence translated into civilian confidence that allowed them to say, okay, I know that I am victorious. I did a good job. Now I can keep going. There was a sense of continuity that said, well, now I got to go out and be a breadwinner and have a family and be successful, because after the money stopped going into the war machine, the money had to go into the rebuilding. And of course, there was the 50s and the prosperity that came with the money. We actually became a very wealthy nation back in the 50s. The dynamic of the family was totally different from today. Mom stayed at home. Dad was a breadwinner. Prices were cheap, relatively, economies of scale. But also when we came out of World War II, there was a sense that it wasn't going to happen again. And we lived in a world where the Korean conflict came out of left field. It took us by surprise, and then that kind of drug us into the whole Southeast Asia thing. We started looking out to more expansion, I could go off on a tangent here about how there is a belief that government is all about perpetual wars because it feeds the economy.
Sure, politically based.
Exactly. Sure. Yeah. And, well, without too much exception, it's really true.
Well, it is. And so now we have not only someone coming out of, for instance, the Vietnam War feeling like there was absolutely no win, but actually going into a new pseudo-war with the feeling that the whole thing is politically motivated.
I agree. One of the things I'll reflect on that I have heard a lot, and I've seen it on the internet, where people say, how is it I am fighting my democracy on somebody else's soil? And they say, well, the threat is really existential because it doesn't impact my life. I was going to go into this about the homeless, where the homeless issue in Delaware County is very in your face to certain individuals. It is not so much in your face to the greater population. They are aware of it because they go by the corner at Walmart, or they see it out at the Safeway, or sometimes they'll see it at the, occasionally you'll see people walking down the street with a shopping cart, or you see them camped out in the park. But just like the news on TV, give you a couple scenarios where on one news channel in the morning, they'll show you on your set, on your TV screen, you'll see from one side of the screen to the other a crowd of people. And you'll say, well, this is New York. And the crowd will look like it's probably several hundred people. But in reality, it's only about 20 people right in front of the camera. But the illusion is that this is a larger group of people than is actually there. And the reason is because that's the way the directors and the producers want you to perceive this situation. When you go to a hurricane, the guy is standing out in the rain, blowing sideways, and that's because the camera is only focused on him. He doesn't need to be there, first of all. But the whole idea, and we have seen time and again where they stage what you see for the most dramatic effect, and it is a skewed perception.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play down the fact that homelessness is not a major, large-scale issue. It is huge. It is unbelievably huge, and this goes back to the broken society from which it comes.
Yeah, one of the examples of media, I guess, wagging the tail of the dog or whatever. And we see the Westboro Baptist ministries and things like that. We see extremist fundamentalist Christians, and we see them on the news a lot. And you go, wow, some of these Christian churches and ministries are quite extreme. They're hate-based and all that. But the reality is that, I mean, right here in Crescent City, we have wonderful churches. They bend over backwards for helping people, and that's the reality. We don't see any hate-based fundamentalist religious people here in Crescent City. I know they exist, but again, that's a good example of the media driving that whole perception. But as far as the local homeless, go on about that.
Well, part of the reason, aside from the fact that the VA commander was going to be here and talking about the VA homeless, the homeless situation in general was brought to our community with Supervisor Roger Gitlin's town hall meeting, to which I applaud him for however he is perceived as a supervisor in the community. He should get high marks for bringing people together to talk about a common issue.
Yes, there was a great turnout too, and plus he had some experts speaking. I mean, Bill Gray gave his legal opinion and things like that. That was, yeah.
In this, almost in the opposite, that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. A little knowledge is all it takes to resolve a situation if enough people know it. By leveling the field and saying, this is how the law reads. These are the facts, without any kind of embellishment by the media or by hearsay. With social media today, it's a coin that continually flips. There's two sides to it. One side is good, one side is really bad. and the bad side is, just like the news on TV, it has a tendency to polarize us. And the louder voices get a lot more exposure, and they have a greater impact, regardless of how accurate they are. And I heard that directly from Abraham Lincoln. Okay, he's the authority.
You heard it directly from him?
Yeah. Because the people on social media can present themselves as an authority on an issue, which is why Wikipedia gets some bad press, is because anybody can write a definition of anything. They have free access and editorial capabilities, and if they say this is the way it is, well, that's written in stone now. Until somebody comes back and says, no, that's not true. And fortunately, there's an arbitration board that says, okay, we have to make sure the public is getting the straight stuff. That's why I don't mind giving them a $3 donation once a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of times there isn't a referee to a situation. When I was young, there was a show on TV called Naked City. And Naked City was a story about cops fighting the bad guys. And usually, if it wasn't an actual crime, a lot of times it was circled around a domestic situation. And in the domestic situation, there was a family or an individual that was showcased in the series, and they were trying to resolve how bad things were happening to somebody, and the police force was coming in and actually being a referee to resolve the situation, put the bad guys away, and make everybody live happier. And sometimes it worked, and most times it worked. Once in a while, it didn't work. But at the very end of the series, and I remember the tagline, is there's 8 million stories in the Naked City. This has been one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Putting our problems, such as homelessness, which can't hold a candle to the backdrop of an actual war. A lot of things are not in proper perspective to the point where people are not traumatized by an event. Right now, we're, quote unquote, to the news, we are mourning the death of our beloved George H.W. Bush. Now, I'm not mourning, but I am part of this country, and according to the news, we, as a country, are mourning.
Yeah, right.
But it doesn't impact me. Same way with the situation of the homeless in Delaware County. If it doesn't touch your life, you don't care.
Well, it's easy to not care. We have some wonderful programs. We have people who really get involved. But, yeah, from day to day, if you don't see them, then out of sight, out of mind.
There's a underlying question that I always reflect on when it comes to the homeless. And fortunately, as a veteran, I can say I got lucky. And I try to question how it is that I became lucky to be in front of the microphone right now. Having had an education, I didn't go to jail, I didn't get strung out on drugs. I had some alcohol problems in the middle part of my life, but I worked my way through them. I have a roof over my head, I pay my bills, I have a car. I've done some traveling. Overall, I have a lot of people to thank, but the person that I thank most are the people that raised me. And that's not necessarily just my parents, but my parents played a huge role. They gave me values. The teachers that I was taught from also led by example. Back in the early days of my childhood, in the 50s and 60s, they were still part of this culture that came out of World War II. And education was perceived differently. I got lucky. And yet, I don't feel that my luck was exceptional. And I question why the good fortune that I have had isn't more common today. Of course, 50 years have passed since then, 40, 50 years, and the world has become a different place. And the way that it's become different is we have several billion more people in the world, several 100 million people more in the United States alone. So as a population grows, things change. Del Norte County is not like it was back then. We've seen the rise and fall of a timber industry. We've seen the rise and somewhat fall of a fishing industry, even a dairy industry. When I was raised in Smith River, there was a creamery. What the hell is a creamery? Well, because of our microclimates and our fertile soil and our good grasslands, we had world-class cheese and cream we exported even back then. We don't have that now. And there used to be a dairy, a real, honest-to-goodness, put the milk in the bottle dairy in Smith River. We don't have that anymore. Which points me to the economy. The economy back in the day I was raised was much more affluent, and yet we were still poor. We had money, but it wasn't like the money of today. A dime for a cup of coffee. They say the economy is doing well right now. We're doing great. We have a real strong economy, but we're still not paying a dime for a cup of coffee like we did then. Inflation, the devaluation of the dollar, has eroded the values of the nation. In my humble opinion, we don't appreciate the value that the dollar brings, or the impact that those dollars have on human life. It's all about values. So I don't have the solution. I don't have a really firm grasp on the problem because it has become so multifaceted. But I believe that in the same work ethic that I was given and maintained to this day, I still believe that we have the tools necessary to resolve it. What we need is the courage to do that.
Yeah, so I think most people nowadays recognize that the great divide between the poor and the rich, it's just become greater and greater, and to be in the middle, to be between poor and rich, you're kind of lucky, nowadays to be in that position. But I don't know if there's ever a way to resolve that or not. A lot of people, I think, on the Republican side argue that when the rich become extremely rich, that there's the trickle-down thing, and I don't think that's ever worked. That's actually been applied and practiced a few times and always failed to demonstrate anything positive from it.
Point in case, yeah. The Democrats, well, I don't want to really add to the polarization of the political parties. And the reason I didn't vote in the 2016 election was because I recognized that the left wing and the right wing belonged to the same bird, and it was the bird that needed to be fixed. And well, all politics is local, and I could have done something to fix that bird. The country was so polarized. I said there has to be some addressing of the system problems before I would feel confident in voting in a ballot. So I went declined a state, I went independent, and now I vote for people with the merit that says that they're worthy rather than party affiliation.
Well, it's interesting. I'm still declined to state. I've never been signed up for either party.
Yeah.
I go by merit.
So back to the Democrats, they are labeled tax and spend, and when we get into this tax issue, prior to 1913, there was no income tax, and we still had roads, and well, it kind of goes sideways from there. Joan Miles, who normally has this hour, is staunchly against socialism, which she feels we're on a train headed for the proverbial brick wall, and we need to make sure that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. The backdrop of anti-socialism would be capitalism, and then once we get into this economy thing, the haves, the have-nots. When I left college in 1979, I was almost PTSD because I had been enlightened by Economics 101 and 102. I understood supply and demand. I had some accounting in me, and I recognized the state of the nation was a dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots. And I said, this is an untenable situation, and it's only going to get worse, which it did. As I emerged from 2008 with Ron Paul and the beginnings of the Libertarian Party, I also became accustomed to Alex Jones, who is a very, very controversial voice, an enlightening voice. A number of his guests had talked about conspiracy theories, and I tried to put them in perspective, and yet I couldn't, because I said, while a lot of people scoffed at them and said they weren't true, they were proving to be fact. We are living a lot of those conspiracy theories of long ago, who said this is not real, and yet here we are. This is a reality, and I'm still kind of disillusioned. I'm saying, where is the truth? Well, out comes Donald Trump, and he says, well, this is fake news. And I said, what? You can't tell me that. And yet he proved it time and again, several different times. And the networks, and I started the what do you call it? Having your eyes peeled is like unpeeling an onion. I recognized was it the movie Network with Peter Finch, and his network head, who said, it's all about ratings. It's all about ratings. It's all about money, 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 money. And if you don't think it is, you're wrong, 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 wrong.
And unfortunately, propaganda is cutting edge. I mean, it's a science, a very high-tech science nowadays, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
So the only answer is for people to use their empirical knowledge, look for themselves, and try to see what's right and wrong. And that's difficult in itself, because how often do we rely on the information coming in? Sometimes almost exclusively.
Someone once said, Jamie, if you were a fish and lived in the ocean, how would you know?
Right.
If you don't know anything different, if you live in a fishbowl, that's your world.
Yeah.
When I got out of Del Norte County even though I had made a couple of trips to like places like Sacramento and San Francisco and Portland, and I knew that the world was larger than just, these redwoods and that ocean. Once I had actually flown out of state, went to Texas, then to Mississippi, and then I flew all the way across country to JFK before I went to Frankfurt, and then I was in Berlin, and all in at the same time. I think they came out with this Walt Disney movie about, or the song, "It's a Small World After All," and I said, garbage. This place is huge. So, and as I said when I started out, my education in the military went far beyond the classrooms that they sent me to. The education I got in the military exposed me, by that contract that I signed, to a culture of the United States in 3 different states I had no exposure to outside of Oregon. It showed me Europe, from Italy to Great Britain, France, even Copenhagen. I learned how other people lived in the world. I had a sense of who I was, where I came from, and what else is out there. I think that's invaluable. If I had my druthers, and I'm serious about this, if I had my druthers, I would make the senior year of high school across the land to be spent in some other country. I don't care what one it is, as long as it isn't something like North Korea, even though that wouldn't be that bad if we could guarantee that they wouldn't go into a prison for something they did. But to go out and experience another culture, to understand the language, to understand how other people live, I think that is one of the greatest things that's lacking in this country when you talk about propaganda, is the fact that you think that you're living in this fishbowl and that's all there is.
Yeah, absolutely. I fortunately, at a late teens, I wound up across the country in another state all of a sudden. And it was such an incredible experience. Just being out of my little fishbowl opened my horizons forever. So I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, we just have about 10 or so minutes left. Do you wanna,
Wow.
I know it flies.
Time flies, you're having fun, huh?
Do you want to talk a little bit more about, there are a lot of programs locally here that do help homeless. We've got St. Vincent's does a huge amount. They not only do they provide, and other thrift stores provide low cost clothing for everyone who wants it, and that's a huge benefit when you don't have to pay $20-$30 for jeans and things like that. The whole community benefits enormously. So one of our unsung heroes are the thrift stores. St. Vincent's even gives out many food boxes and things like that to people who are in need. And then we've got Jerry Johnson. I was hoping he'd be here today. We're going to look for him next week. He probably was at the memorial today for one of their local folks. But he runs homeless veterans lunch program. It's once a week, and it gives a real good lunch that he delivers. We can't expect them to come to town or anything like that. So we've got a great little team of volunteers. They put the lunches together, and then Jerry Johnson goes out with someone else, and they go sometimes into the bush almost, and deliver these lunches to homeless veterans. So that's a great program, and there's others. I always keep extra clothes in the car to hand out, and coats, sometimes sleeping bags. So, but there's a lot of them that do not come out of the bush. They either the PTSD or whatever the situation. And there's just so much going on there. I know Marianne has been on the show before, and I'm going to try to get her to come back and talk more about that, because she has a lot of firsthand experience with that. That's Mary Ann Fallman. I don't know if you know her. Okay.
Oh, is that Alex Fallman's?
It is, yes.
Okay, yeah, okay. I know Alex.
And she helps with the Veterans Lunch each Thursday when we put that together. But on that note, do you have any other?
Yeah. I got a few things.
Thanks.
You lit a few candles there. Of course, naturally, when you see someone alongside the road, at least I do. I don't know if other people do this or not, but I would think it's fairly common. As soon as I see somebody that is less fortunate than me, I wonder in my heart of hearts how they got that way. I wonder what I would do if that were me. I try to put myself in their shoes. I also ask the question, am I my brother's keeper? Now, in a culture that I would say for the greater portion is Christian, this has got to weigh heavy on them. And I reflect on my veterans heritage. And when I first got back to Delaware County, I didn't have a job. I had multiple skills, but I also recognized that the economy was not that good. It still isn't good. The economy's bad. We're in a very depressed community, a county. I wondered if even if I had a job, even though I'd have to start out at the bottom, as everybody does, if I would be able to survive, have a roof over my head, or live in a cardboard box. So, in my experience with the VA, I transferred my medical records up here. I went down to the veterans clinic down there to get established. I got a physical, and at that very moment, there happened to be a visitation of a portion of the Vietnam Wall here at the Beachfront Park. They brought, 8-10 slabs, and I recognized almost at the same time that I went into the Air Force, it had come back to remind me of my roots. And the cry from the veterans community then is the same cry that happens now. They don't want a hand out. They want a hand up. And when you start talking about how to help people, I'm reminded of Biology 101, which reflects on the population. If you feed a man, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach the man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. I believe deep in my heart, the best thing we can do for our homeless is have a thriving community that has jobs available for people jobs that reflect dignity and the ability to live in the community in which they're working. And I think if we don't increase and open our doors to new businesses, then we're doing a disservice to ourselves and our homeless people. It's about the money. I don't know any other way of saying it. You have cheap things from China. You have a dollar store. You have Walmart. It's all cheap. And what are we producing? Well, we have a good dairy industry. That's true. We do have a pretty good fishing fleet, especially when we don't have algal blooms and no crabbing. Oh God. Yeah. We have tourism, which is all well and fine, but it is seasonal, and it's not one of the best things to happen in the dead of winter when it's cold out there, and people are living in tents. But if we had, some good commerce here, and I don't have the answer. I know that we need more industry here, some sort of industry that is more weather resistant, that will allow the homeless people to have a job that isn't taken up by people who can live multi people to a house and on minimum wage.
Yeah. Now, on the lighter side, I've been hearing good things about the Daily Bread Ministries. They paid off their mortgage. I think they're going to open up quite a few more beds for the. And I know before they had it open to people in really bad weather, I think was the rule, or something like that. Do you know anything about that?
No.
I don't know if that'll still be true. I don't think they're allowing them to make permanent residents. And that's probably right. I don't know what the right answers are either. I don't think any of us do. There's a triage that has to take place, and you figure out who will not come out of the bush. They don't try to force them out of there. You're going to lose that. They're always going to go back there, unfortunately. Some are broken and can't be fixed, but of those who can, then we have to.
I agree, and I also it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that rests at the feet of the current population that's able to understand the source of the problem. And while I can't, no, let's go back. It has to start from ground zero. We might not be able to fix the current problem. We just have to live through it. But tomorrow's problem, we can do something about. The parents, the family unit, having a sense of a family unit that raises children with the understanding that they are going to grow up to be tomorrow's adults, and that the parents understand that those adults shouldn't be living in the bushes. Is really important. A little bit of discipline to make sure that they do their homework and understand what values are, and that it takes knowledge and understanding to make it in the world, to be able to understand where you fit in, a sense of identity for the child. To say, I'm going to be one of these people. I grew up thinking I was going to be an airline pilot. I had a goal. I don't know that children have the same goals anymore because they don't know what's going to happen.
When I grew up, I remember my dad always saying, geez, the bomb could drop any time and we'll all be dead, and I grew up with that fear. I really thought, why try? Why not just live for today? Because, it sounds like we don't have any guarantee, let alone likelihood of being alive, 10 or 20 years from now. And that was all false. I mean, it's everything's perception. I guess there's always that possibility, but you can't live your life according to that. That was my dad's fear, and that was placed on us, and we didn't understand. So we kind of bought into that until we realized that wasn't the situation. So a lot of kids are growing up with, the nihilism, what's the point?
When we came out of World War II, the world was our oyster. We had a sense of hope. We had a mission. We're going to build the life of tomorrow. Well, it's tomorrow. What are we going for now? We need to instill that sense of the sense of a mission, the sense of a goal, the fact that this is the first day of the rest of your life, and you have something, a place to go. There's a whole world full of adventure out there. You can make something and make the community better, and be a contributor, play an important part in somebody's life, be a doctor, be a nurse. You can make this whole thing better.
Yep, and we can start at the community level. So anyway, we're just a couple of minutes before 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And this is KFUG 101.1 on your FM dial. And we'll go ahead and wrap up for the day. I'm hoping to see Jerry Johnson here next week, and I'll invite him on. I think he got hung up at the memorial they had today. So
thanks for having me, Wes.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming on, and hope to see you again next week. Maybe you can join all of us whoever's here.
Anything's possible.
Okay. All right. And back to your music entertainment.